As many of you already know, I'm not really a fan of roguelike games. However, when the opportunity came around to review this game, I researched it as deeply as I could, and much to my surprise, it actually looked like something that I could enjoy. I don't usually like the way roguelike games operate, I understand them completely, I just don't enjoy the core gameplay loop. That said, this game looked like it would be simple enough to understand and gives you the ability to collect loads of cute anime girls, and let's face it, I wasn't going to say no to that, was I? Unfortunately, the way that I understood a lot of the game mechanics turned out to be wrong, and as a result it became difficult to enjoy. Thing is though, you guys know I'm not in the business of tearing down games just because I don't personally like them. So with that in mind, I think this game is a well-made and unique roguelike experience that in the end simply wasn't for me. So what is Super Bullet Break all about? Well, it's a unique roguelike game that features deck building elements and is inspired by Japanese gacha machines. You'll be happy to know that one of the game's official selling points is, quote, gacha without the microtransactions. It may be inspired by gacha, but everything is in the game and available to the player at no extra cost. The story, setting, and the game itself are surprisingly simple. A rogue AI has started to infect and take over multiple popular online games, and it's up to the three main characters, Akari, Hikaru, and Sumire, to defeat them and save the day. The 7 corrupted online games represent the 7 different levels that you need to conquer in order to repair them, and they each have multiple maps and bosses to defeat within them. During your runs, you'll be able to collect and utilize over 160 different bullets, which are represented by anime girls or small monsters, and they each have their own abilities. A lot of what you're seeing may look a bit confusing, but I'll do my best to explain the mechanics to you. It's best to think of the girls or bullets as cards in a trading card game. In fact, the whole battle system is essentially a deck building game. If you're not familiar with deck building games, they're kinda like board games where everyone starts with the same basic deck, and each player improves and builds a better deck over the course of the game. This is of course very different to games like Yu-Gi-Oh!, Pokemon, or Magic the Gathering, where the decks are always constructed before you play. At the start of each run, you'll be given a basic deck of bullets, and as you progress through that run, you'll acquire new and more powerful bullets to add to your deck. You'll also acquire various items to help you throughout the game, but if your HP is reduced to 0, you have to start from the very beginning and you lose all of your newly acquired bullets and items, such is the nature of a roguelike game. Each map has various nodes that you can visit during your run, and they each represent a different kind of encounter. The pink virus-looking things represent combat, where you'll take on random enemies in turn-based combat using your bullets to defeat them. The little towns represent a random event, which can sometimes be positive or negative and will often ask you to make a choice to receive a reward. The gold box is a treasure node where you can pick up a random box for a random reward, and these can contain Giga, which is this game's currency, items, or new bullets to add to your deck. The coffee cup is a rest spot where you can heal up or change one of your bullets' cartridges, more on that in a bit. The shopping cart is a store where you can spend your Giga on items, discard unwanted bullets, or recruit new ones. Lastly, you have the boss node at the end of the run, and as you probably guessed, this is where you fight the boss of that map. Once again, this is a roguelike game, so it is worth noting that if you manage to beat the first boss and get all the way through the second map and lose to the second boss, you'll go right back to the start of the very first map. It will not give you a checkpoint after defeating the bosses, and you'll need to beat all of it in one attempt. This should become easier the more you play, of course, because you'll have an understanding of what's available to you. Now we get to the combat, which is pretty much the core part of the game. As I mentioned earlier, it's best to think of it in terms of a trading card game and a deck building game. So your bullets are your cards, your magazine is the deck, the graveyard is where your used bullets go, and the cartridges are like permanent buffs that you apply to your bullets. Every single bullet in the game is presented as an anime girl or a cute little monster, and you'll always start a run with exactly the same setup. You do have the ability to gain one additional random bullet at the start of a run to help you out though. When you get into battle, you will draw 5 bullets from your magazine, and this is your starting hand. The combat is turn-based and it works on a cost versus weight system. At the top of the screen, you'll see a blue bar which is segmented, and it shows you the enemies that you're facing. These segments represent the wait time of your enemies. So let's say that the enemy's portrait was 10 segments away. Well, that means that you can play cards one after the other that add up to 9 before that enemy will get a turn. You might have 3 bullets that each cost 3 to play, for example, and you will get to use all 3 of those bullets before your opponent can act. In that exact scenario, you will get to use a 4th bullet in a row, but it will then be your opponent's turn immediately. There are actually a ton of combos and effects that you can use to delay this timeline, and a lot more things you can do besides. Every bullet has a cost, a rarity, an attack power, an attack range, and effects. As you might expect, the rarity denotes how difficult a bullet is to find and is usually a good way to gauge its strength. The attack power is how much damage a bullet will deal to its target, and the range lets you know if it can hit one or multiple enemies with a single attack. The effects vary wildly, and it would be impossible for me to explain all of the interactions, but they can do things like add attack power to your next bullet, add debuffs to enemies, grant armor or shields to your character, gain 1 attack point for every other bullet you use this turn, heal you, and much more. As mentioned previously, there's over 160 to collect, and some of them even fall into certain archetypes so that you can build a run around a specific theme. I actually misunderstood what collecting the bullets really meant initially, but that was my issue, so I'll talk about that in the personal opinion section. Lastly, that brings us to the cartridges. You might have noticed that every bullet in the game has a sort of frame or background on them. This is the bullet's cartridge, and it's basically like a piece of equipment. They too have different ratings and can range from basic things like +1 to damage, or inflicting poison on anything they hit. These cartridges are always the same in your starting magazine, but they can be swapped out for better ones at shop nodes during a run. You can also find the same bullet many times over with a different cartridge equipped. An example of this occurs when you beat the first boss. You'll actually get a choice of a reward which is the same bullet 3 times but with different cartridges equipped to it. Of course you won't get to keep this forever as it will be lost when you fail, but that should give you an idea of how it all works. The acquisition of these cartridges is actually another thing I didn't quite understand before I applied for the review code, but again, I'll talk about that in the next section. The game itself will be available on PS4, PS5, Nintendo Switch and PC via download on the 12th of August 2022. It'll also have a physical copy for the PS4 and Nintendo Switch in the form of a Day 1 edition that includes a full-color art book. Do keep in mind that the physical copies will not be available on the same date as the digital download and are currently set to release around the 1st or 2nd of September 2022. There is no dedicated PS5 version, but the PS4 copy will of course work via backwards compatibility. So what did I think of the game overall? Well, it's another one of those situations where I understand what it is, I get what it's doing, and I see how it fits into the roguelike genre. But unfortunately, due to me misunderstanding how some of the key mechanics worked before I applied for the code, it left me a little bit disappointed. Now I want to be fair and say up front that I think it's good. I think if you like this style of game, you should absolutely pick it up. As I've said before, I'm not one of those people that would just say a game is bad because I personally didn't like it. It'd be like me saying vegetables are bad foods because I don't eat them, which would be, well, utter nonsense. I try to apply that line of thinking to everything in my life these days because I feel like it's a bit of a lost art in 2022, but maybe that's just me. So let me explain what I meant when I said I misunderstood some of the game's mechanics. As you know, I'm not a huge fan of roguelike games. I respect them greatly and the people who enjoy them, but I find it really hard to enjoy the gameplay loop. When I looked into this game before I reviewed it, I saw that you could, quote, collect the bullets and collect the cartridges. I assumed that you would start off with the basic magazine of bullets that I talked about earlier, and then the more you played, the more bullets you would actually acquire, and you would be able to put those new bullets into your starting magazine and begin each run with an advantage. This is not the case though, at all, and if it had have been, I think I would have been able to enjoy it a lot more. That small, simple change would have definitely helped me enjoy it more, but I do realise I'm looking at this from the viewpoint of someone who doesn't really play roguelike games, but still. You don't actually obtain any of the bullets permanently. Collecting or unlocking them simply puts them in this Pokédex style menu to say that you've seen it before. The same is true for the cartridges. You can look at all the ones you've seen, but you can't actually own them or edit your starting bullets in any way. After my first maybe, 6 runs or something like that, I went into the options menu to figure out how to customize the bullets and my cartridges in the starting magazine. And when I realized that you couldn't, I genuinely thought I was missing something. At that point, the realization set in and I was just like, you can't actually change any of this, can you? It's all acquired and lost within the runs themselves. I don't think you can actually collect anything. And I'll be honest, my heart sank a little bit when I realized this because I would have loved that kind of system, but I suppose that would have made it more of a roguelite as opposed to a roguelike. But yeah, that's what happened. Don't get me wrong, I completely understand it all now and I get why it does what it does, but it just further proves to me that I'm not destined to love any games within this genre. With all that said though, going on what I've learned about these kind of games over the years, this does seem to be a really unique and interesting take on it. I think the artwork for the bullet girls and the little monsters is very good indeed. I think there was only a few characters that looked a little bit off to me, and I don't know if all the art is done by the same artist, but a few of them did look a bit weird. Sort of like when the West attempts to do an anime and it just doesn't really look right, or when they take Power Rangers characters and make them look like John Cena was stuffed into a morph suit. Overall though, I think the presentation is really quite good. I enjoyed seeing the pixel art on the map layouts, but then also having the really high quality, high resolution images for the bullets. It's also a nice touch that the bullets are shown in their chibi form when in combat. I quite like that. While the gameplay is quite punishing, I think it's exactly what fans would be looking for. I mean, yeah, it's a niche title and I couldn't properly recommend it to the masses, but the people who buy these sort of games know what they want and I think they'll enjoy this. The game feels 100% complete, solid, and never once felt cheaply made to me. It's got a nice level of quality to it, and my review copy ran really well on the PS5. In my opinion, I think Super Bullet Break is a solid addition to the roguelike catalogue despite not enjoying it that much myself. I like the way the game mixes high-resolution images with nostalgic pixel art, and even though I'm not very good at it, the gameplay loop does seem well designed. From what I understand of it, I think fans of this type of game will find a lot to like within this title. To put it simply, it seems like a good example of the genre that's worth playing, especially for its asking price. Ultimately, this seemed like something I might enjoy, so I gave it a try, and to be fair, I didn't hate it at all. In all honesty, I had a pretty good time with it overall, and I can tell that it's a decent game even though it didn't really resonate with me personally. I think if you play a lot of roguelikes and you're into the more niche anime stuff, you should probably give this one a shot. If, like me, these kind of games aren't really your thing, then I don't think this will change your mind, and I reckon you'd be better off looking elsewhere. If you enjoy the video, I really hope you'll consider subscribing, and if you like what I do and want to help support the channel, please check out the first link in the video description down below. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.